Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Bùi Văn Dũng worked as a personal driver for one of Vietnam's wealthiest tycoons. Most days, his job was to drive his boss, 68-year-old businesswoman Truong My Lan, around bustling Ho Chi Minh City. And occasionally, she would ask him to run other errands, like picking things up for her or delivering packages. And a lot of times, these errands involved moving cash around the city.
She would basically say, I have money this afternoon at the bank, go get it.
That's John Boudreau, Bloomberg's Vietnam bureau chief.
These were bundles of cash, just big bundles of cash. And he would go pick it up, and he would either take it to her apartment or her real estate company or whatever entity she wanted. And sometimes she would give him tips, as much as like $200 per trip he made.
And the driver kept detailed notes about each cash run he made for her.
He meticulously wrote down every trip he made.
Now, moving big stacks of cash around the city like this isn't unusual in Vietnam.
You have to remember, Vietnam for decades has been a cash-based society, and it still is not unusual to see people hauling big sacks of cash to and from the banks. And people do this. They'll even put them on motorbikes. They'll be carting tens of thousands of dollars on a motorbike going to and from the banks.
What was unusual was just how much cash the driver was transporting for his boss.
She was using him to shepherd a lot of money, more than $4 billion, over the span of 3.5 years.
His last drop-off was in September 2022. And a month later, his employer Lang was arrested. She was accused of masterminding one of the world's biggest frauds, a massive $12.3 billion scam.
It was the largest financial fraud case Vietnam has ever seen. And it's even more than the Sam Bankman-Fried case in the United States.
A key piece of evidence in the trial, the detailed notes Lang's driver had kept of every stash of cash he delivered. Today, Lang is facing even more charges in a second case that includes money laundering and illegally transporting about $4.5 billion across the border. The news about her current trial, which involves 33 other co-defendants, is widely broadcasted, and it's become a centerpiece in the government's anti-corruption campaign.
And I don't think Vietnamese have seen anything like this before. And the government has been exceedingly open in talking about how they're going after this corruption.
Welcome to the Big Take Asia from Bloomberg News. I'm Oanh Ha. Every week, we take you inside some of the world's biggest and most powerful economies and the markets, tycoons, and businesses that drive this ever-shifting region. Today on the show, the downfall of Vietnam's most infamous businesswoman, how she was able to embezzle so much money for so long, and what her multi-billion-dollar fraud case means for Vietnam's fast-growing economy. Truong My Lan's rise is a Vietnamese rags-to-riches story. Known in business circles as Madame Lang, she got her start in the late 1980s, selling makeup and hair accessories from her family's stall inside the sprawling Bến Thành market, right in the heart of Ho Chi Minh City.
It's a huge cavernous indoor market, but it's just jam-packed with people and vendors. It's a hard life. They work 7 days a week.
This was a time of rapid change in Vietnam. After the end of the war with the United States, the country reunified under communism, but was financially ruined and internationally isolated. To jumpstart the economy, the Communist Party of Vietnam started a series of market reforms in 1986, and Lang saw opportunity.
She met her husband. He is a Hong Kong businessman, and together, the two of them, they could see where the country was going, and they started buying up a lot of land quite cheaply. And that was the beginning of her property empire.
In 1991, Lang founded a real estate company that rapidly became one of the country's premium property firms.
She built up a large property portfolio of hotels, restaurants, residential buildings, office buildings, and a lot of them become among the most prestigious properties in Ho Chi Minh City.
Anything that we'd recognize today?
Well, if you were to come here and you were to visit the Reverie Saigon Hotel, which is right in the center of Ho Chi Minh City, you would see a very opulent facility. You're talking about her crown jewel. It has gold-plated elevators, chandeliers. The 2 top-end suites have prices that start at $12,000 a night.
Oh my gosh, what crazy opulence, if you can afford it.
And the thing is, this opulent structure isn't far from the marketplace where it all began for her. But truly, it is a world away. For a lot of the vendors now in that marketplace, they view her as kind of this Vietnamese fairy tale. This woman who literally rose from nothing, or just like them, living life just like them, to being one of the most prestigious and wealthiest women in Vietnam.
By 2011, Lan had established herself as a prominent businesswoman in Ho Chi Minh City. That year, she arranged the merger of 3 small and struggling banks into a larger entity, the Saigon Commercial Bank, or SCB. The bank became the 5th largest lender in Vietnam. The bank would also come to be at the center of one of the world's biggest fraud cases. According to prosecutors, Lan illegally controlled more than 90% of the bank by paying people to acquire stakes in it. Then she built an ecosystem of companies, including ghost businesses, that she used to secure loans and register for collateral to withdraw money from the bank. Once the loans were approved, the money was either transferred to the bank accounts of these ghost firms and individuals or directly picked up in cash.
She essentially controlled 90% or more of the bank. And she was also able to put in place trusted lieutenants to run the bank. According to the police and prosecutors, this was essentially her own entity, and she could use it to bankroll the growth of her empire.
So literally her own piggy bank.
Exactly.
On a late night in October 2022, Lan was arrested at her luxury apartment.
Apparently, she was getting ready for bed, because when they took what the equivalent is for Vietnam as the mugshot, you can see she completely has no makeup on. And this was someone who was always known for being very coiffed and everything.
It didn't take long for the word to spread, and it rattled the bank's customers.
And the news was announced on a Saturday. The following Monday, there was a run on Saigon Commercial Bank.
And why was that?
People knew she was closely tied to Saigon Commercial Bank. Her real estate company was closely tied to this bank. There was panic, and so for several days, people were lining up, demanding their money out. The central bank governor repeatedly put out statements saying, your money is safe, your money is safe. And then eventually, they took over the bank, essentially. They placed officials, other executives from other banks on the board to try to calm everything down. And eventually, it did work.
Around 36,000 bondholders have been identified as victims. Together, these people allegedly invested more than $1 billion through 4 companies linked to Lan.
It touches a lot of the kind of your average people putting their faith and trust and money in this bank, and a lot of them buying these bonds, and then everything just blowing up. And so it's not just something that a bunch of wealthy people did to other wealthy people.
After spending more than a year in detainment, Lan was sentenced to death by lethal injection in April. She was also convicted of bribing government officials to look the other way. 17 bank or financial inspectors were also convicted, including the former head of the state bank's inspection and supervision unit. That bank official was sentenced to life in prison after being found guilty of accepting as much as $5.2 million in bribes. But it didn't end there. This week, the Vietnamese court will issue another verdict on charges that Lan and others were involved in fraudulent asset appropriation, money laundering, and illegally transporting more than $4 billion across the border. What that trial means for Vietnam's growing economy and the government's efforts to crack down on corruption, that's after the break. Vietnamese real estate tycoon Truong My Lan was given the death sentence for orchestrating one of the biggest fraud cases in the world. And months after her first trial, prosecutors filed new charges against her, along with 33 other defendants.
They're being accused of laundering $18 billion, cross-border transportation of $4.5 billion, and appropriating $1.2 billion from investors via bond issuances.
Lang's second trial kicked off last month, and Bloomberg's Vietnam bureau chief, John Boudreau, says people regularly showed up to watch it on a giant screen out in front of the courthouse.
They've set up a gigantic screen that usually people here use to watch football, soccer. And then there's about 100 of these blue plastic stools. You'll have bondholders all sitting there watching this. And inside, of course, all the chairs, everything is full.
One of the reasons why this case has gotten so much attention is because it's rattled so many ordinary Vietnamese. And the communist government is showcasing it as the kind of high-level corruption they say they want to stop.
It really is endemic in the culture, from police officers taking bribes on the streets, to traffic police, to officials who will take money to ensure a project gets approved smoothly. It just becomes a way of doing things. Vietnam's late party chief, Nguyen Phu Trong, who passed away this last summer, has for decades pursued anti-corruption, and he called it his blazing furnace campaign. He has long believed that the party's credibility is at risk if it doesn't root out high-level graft.
And Lang was not the only one who got caught in the blazing furnace. The corruption fight has gone all the way up to the top, taking down 3 deputy prime ministers and 2 presidents. In just last year, officials launched corruption investigations into more than 2,000 individuals, nearly double from the previous year. That's according to government data. But at the same time, critics say the probes, who gets ensnared, and the punishment involved are incredibly opaque. There are concerns the campaign has also been used as a political tool to get rid of rivals. And the anti-corruption drive has also created bottlenecks for investment. John says government sources told Bloomberg that they would rather do nothing than take a risk in approving projects and end up getting dragged into a future scandal.
It has caused massive fear among government workers, bureaucrats. They're terrified. If they approve Project A 2 years from now, will the Ministry of Public Security come knocking on their doors and saying, we're investigating your approval of this project?
For now, foreign investors are undeterred by projects slowing down. Investments are still pouring into Vietnam at record levels, capitalizing on the country's low labor costs and established supply chains. It's Vietnam's economic rise that catapulted Lang into one of the country's richest tycoons. And now, her spectacular fall is riveting Vietnam. As this episode airs, Lang is still awaiting the court's verdict in her second trial. She's facing a life sentence on top of already being on death row. Lang has denied some of the charges and is appealing her death sentence. Even if she wins her appeal to overturn the death sentence, she's likely facing a lifetime behind bars. In court, Lang broke down and said she never expected her life to end up this way. And she's prepared to take responsibility. Through tears, she said, that's her destiny. This is the Big Take Asia from Bloomberg News. I'm Oanh Ha. This episode was produced by Naomi Yang Yang, and Jessica Beck. It was mixed by Alex Sugiera and fact-checked by Edu Duan. It was edited by Caitlin Kenny, Aaron Edwards, and Emily Cadman. There was additional reporting by Philip Hymans with assistance from Nguyen Sung Quân and Nguyen Xiu Tuin. Naomi Shaven is our senior producer. Elizabeth Ponso is our senior editor. Nicole Beamsterbauer is our executive producer, and Sage Bauman is Bloomberg's head of podcasts. Please follow and review the Big Take Asia wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps new listeners find the show. See you next time.